Hello all of you beautiful people of the internet, my name is Onepeg, and this is a video that has to do with Escape from Tarkov, kind of. More so, it's gonna deal with the cycle. For most of you guys that are relatively familiar with the content that I've created over the years, you know that it's heavily based in Escape from Tarkov. Escape from Tarkov kind of ended up coining this new genre, referred to now as a competitive quest shooter, which kind of sounds like a looter shooter with extra steps, which is really, if you think about it, basically what it is. In steps the cycle. The cycle has seen a lot of iterations over the years. In fact, gone so far as to have the studio kind of shut everything down and go back to the drawing board because it just really wasn't received all that great. We're all relatively, at this point, if you're familiar with my content at least, we're all relatively familiar with the idea of Tarkov being something that is extremely punishing and at the same time extremely rewarding and has absolutely awesome, in my opinion, amazing gunplay. Now, there's been an awful lot of criticism as of late in regard to the movement mechanics specifically and the inertia additions, but we'll be getting to that in probably my next video that has to do with the community's ideas around what inertia is and whether or not it's good. But I want to focus on the cycle and how it compares to Tarkov and whether or not this game is something that I believe has staying power. See, as of yesterday, Jaeger Development, the developer of the cycle out of Germany, released another iteration of its early access beta testing phase, which started on March 16th and is supposed to run for a few weeks. See, the cycle has gone through some various iterations. Now the game is called The Cycle Frontier. The original cycle was created back in 2019, which was a first-person shooter set on the same planet called Fortuna 3, and had the same idea of having to complete contracts given to them by three main factions, with the one exception that the map was isolated to 20 players at a time. People had one solid match, you had 20 minutes to escape from it. The person with the most points, I guess, won. All of that got scrubbed. Well, at least the gameplay cycle, I guess. No, it's hard to explain. But now we're into the Cycle Frontier, where it's the same planet, the same factions. There's still missions and faction reputation and rewards and currency and all this other stuff, but instead of it being a 20-minute round with 20 players, it's a relatively persistent world. See, the cycle does things slightly different than that of Escape from Tarkov, but very much the same, where the idea now is that you're going up against other players in a survival-esque type of take, very, very similar to that of Escape from Tarkov, with the one caveat that it looks a lot more like Fortnite and has some differing movement mechanics, but I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But back to the title of the video. Is the cycle Tarkov Lite? Well, in a lot of ways, yeah. It absolutely is. We look at the inventory system, for example, and the inventory system is a grid-style system with just a series of squares where an item takes up a square. But instead of an item like in Escape from Tarkov taking up a certain number of grid slots, in this case, it's a weight system relation. So the number of grid squares is unlimited, but the weight is the limitation. Now, that doesn't actually give you any type of movement penalties in its current iteration of the game, but it does end up having a limitation insofar as what it is that you can carry in total. So you do end up at some point making, I guess, a decision in terms of what it is that you're going to bring and how much. There is also a secure container where you have the ability to be able to put items in, with, again, the exception in this case being a weight limit as opposed to a grid size limit. Obviously, there are weapons and different ammo types and there are different attachments, but all of this is very much watered down and very arcade style. The power amount of the weapons, the attachments, the armor, ranging from white quality to green to blue to purple, and then ultimately gold or legendary or orange, depending on whatever it is that you refer to it as. And then the ammo ranges from small, medium, heavy, explosive, and then shotgun rounds. We can't leave out shotguns now, can we, boys? So it's a far cry from the extra amount of detail that you would see in a game like Tarkov. It seems as though the cycle is pulling an awful lot of influence. For instance, in the last beta round, there weren't secret stashes, versus now you'll find secret stashes littered throughout in various different locations all over the map. And they look very, very similar to a certain buried barrel. Things like fall damage, movement penalties, things like that are also things that are less arcade-like than that of Escape from Tarkov. Rather than scavs, this game provides us with alien fauna that ranges anywhere from little guys that explode if they get too close to you when they try to chase you down, like little kamikaze bombs, to acid spitters, to little pack dog types, and then going up to much larger fauna that actually gives a pretty solid challenge and is rather dangerous, like Jeff here. Yeah, I don't actually know what his name is. We just call him Jeff. Hey, Jeff. At any rate, rather than just having reskinned PMC models with different voice lines and different armor loadouts, the competition, I guess in human form, is other humans. Now, in terms of complexity, Tarkov has this one pinned. There's no real complexity with the cycle that I can see whatsoever. Collect a lot of stuff, use that stuff to either craft items or use that stuff to hand in for extra reputation, which unlocks higher weapon tiers, rinse and repeat. It's really not that difficult of a cycle. I keep using the word cycle an awful lot in this video. In the case of Tarkov, though, there are things that Tarkov does better, and there are things that I believe that the cycle does better that they could both probably learn from. Now, again, in my opinion, I feel as though the cycle is drawing very, very heavily on some Tarkovian inspiration for an awful lot of the mechanics that they've done. However, for instance, the cycle has the ability to mantle higher platforms, which Tarkov doesn't possess at all. There's no movement mechanic or animations that allow you to be able to do any mantling in Tarkov at the moment. While there is a map for you to be able to access in the cycle, the extract points are relatively randomized and are typically set across the map from wherever it is that you spawn in that instance. You're not going to just run to the same point every single time. It creates a little bit more randomization. The map is, at some level, a bit more procedurally generated. See, the regional aspect of the map, it will remain static. But when you get to those different regions, those regions change in shape, size, form, and sometimes there's a puzzle to do that will differ from experience to experience. So not every single time that you load into the map are you going to be doing the same iteration of whatever it was that you did the last time. Like, imagine if Dorms on Customs had 3 or 4 iterations that it would shuffle between every time that you loaded up Customs and you weren't really sure which one you were going to get, or a multitude of other buildings that could possibly end up doing the same thing. That's basically what the cycle is doing with its map generation. And I think that that's great. That's brilliant. That's something that a game like Tarkov could benefit from because it would change the flow of combat and you wouldn't know what you would get. It would keep things more fresh. The cycle's movement is also slower. Now, I know that there are a lot of people that will complain about Tarkov's movement not being very fast, or the movement of Tarkov prior to inertia was better, etc., etc. But a game like the cycle actually has more penalizing movement than compared to that of Escape from Tarkov. The fall damage when you fall from a higher height in the cycle appears to be higher and kicks in at a much lower height than what Escape from Tarkov will give you. The ability to boost jump, like you can in Tarkov, doesn't exist in the cycle at all, and the cycle's AD strafe movements are extremely slow. Extremely slow. You compare that to the abilities that you have in Escape from Tarkov, Tarkov's movement mechanics will run circles around how the cycle reacts. In fact, just in the falling alone, the movement is very penalizing. If you fall from a high enough height, not only do you take a bunch of damage, but your character also buckles its knees and puts its hands to the ground in order to be able to stop itself from having that inertial movement basically into the dirt, disallowing you the ability to maintain your target or to fire on them for a good 3 to 4 seconds, which basically allows your target to be able to recover your position and you end up being penalized as a result. The cycle is also very, very arcadey in its feel, with kind of pew-pew laser guns with weird digital displays and very futuristic elements that almost makes the stuff that you're approaching and firing upon feel rather spongy. I'm sure that is very much diminished as the weapon quality improves, but the cost associated with building those things or getting to the reputation point is pretty grindy. The cycle doesn't have any soft skills, it doesn't have any leveling. The leveling, if you want to think about it that way, is based in procurement. What items have you gotten over time, and what will that craft you, or have you unlocked enough faction rep in order to be able to buy better tiers of gear? That is your level. How much gear and how valuable is the gear that you're bringing into this raid today? Do you have enough backup currency to be able to risk the biscuit with whatever it is that you're bringing in should you die? And if you do die, are you going back to being a pleb in, I guess, white gear versus the blue gear or blue quality weapons, etc., that you were able to bring into the last run? But the map loads incredibly fast, very fast. It's very smooth, and it's almost instantaneous. When you hit launch, it takes about 15 seconds for you to end up in a drop pod and be on your way to the surface. It takes almost no time to get into a map. In the same amount of time that it took you to run 2 raids in Escape from Tarkov, say an average run time of 20 minutes, you could easily do 3 or 4 runs in a game like the Cycle. There are 2 other points of comparison here. The first is the hideout. In Tarkov, you have a hideout that you can upgrade over time and allows you to be able to do some various crafting things. In the Cycle, you have the ability to upgrade your hideout that will give you larger stash sizes, a higher weight limit allowance for your prison pocket, for instance, and then the ability to be able to generate, I guess, packages of care packages of items every 24 hours or less, depending on how you upgrade the hideout, and give you the ability to generate some secondary currency. There is also the ability for you to get some of your insurance return cash back to you. See, the insurance system in the cycle is twofold. The first is you can, set aside and pay for some insurance that says if you die, we'll return you a chunk of the money of the value of the items that you're bringing into this raid with you. Or you have the ability to get back the item itself. Now, if you get back the item itself, that is paid for with a secondary currency and is paid for per slot. This secondary currency can only, insofar as what I have seen right now, reliably be generated through your hideout only, and starts off at a very small trickle. So that aspect of the insurance really has to be done sparingly, if you will. And if there is one thing that I believe that Tarkov kind of has head and shoulders above that of a game like the Cycle that I've seen from iterations of beta test to beta test, is that the Cycle is slowly but surely, progressively diminishing the value of the items that you find on the map as you move along. See, the Cycle is going to release as a free-to-play game, whereas Escape from Tarkov, as we know, has a buy-in. Now, Tarkov has said that they do not believe in and will not be implementing at any point in the future microtransactions, whereas the Cycle will end up having a fully implemented battle pass that I believe will be purely cosmetic in nature. However, there is absolutely premium currency that is going to come into play here. They would be having in-app purchases in the broadly accepted style. That means we won't sell direct advantages to players for pay to win, and instead we'll offer cosmetic items and quality of life improvements. So the way that this reads is that we're going to be talking about pay for convenience, which is very similar to what people will argue the EOD package is for Escape from Tarkov. The main difference with this is that this is going to be on an ongoing basis where you'll be able to acquire either Battle Pass items and or premium currency to give you those skins, cosmetic items, and quality of life improvements like they mentioned. Now, the quality of life improvement that I could see right off of the kick is the ability to be able to skip ahead in time. See, the crafting system, like in Escape from Tarkov, is time-gated. But unlike Escape from Tarkov, you have the ability to skip ahead in that time as long as you have the currency to spend to do it. And you can see how over time, especially in the upper echelons, when things are taking possibly days to be able to upgrade your hideout, for instance, of which, by the way, you can only upgrade one module across the entire hideout at a time, that would start tying into somebody's ability to, mule cash into the system to get that secondary currency to be able to afford those upgrades. Now, while in the free-to-play system this has been widely accepted, the issue here is that this starts breaking down the competitiveness of the game. At some level, the matchmaking has to start taking into account what the gear loadouts of all of these people are. See, because there's a leap between a gray armor piece and a green armor piece, and a larger leap between a green armor and a blue quality armor piece. It seems as though 5 points of armor really does matter when it comes to how much damage absorption it's going to do. If somebody with enough money can just kind of skip ahead in the crafts, as long as they've managed to farm the materials that they need to make them, which, by the way, is very, very easy as long as you figure out where it is that you need to look. You and a knife and a backpack can do an awful lot of loot damage. The question then becomes, where is the differentiation between a one-time purchase that gives you a small bolus of items on an extremely small or short duration time to kill like there is in Escape from Tarkov, versus the ability to be able to just continuously purchase your way into gear sets on an ongoing basis? Again, as long as you take 15 minutes worth of time to loot up the vast majority of items that you would need, at least in the early to mid game. Now, maybe in the late game that would be a little bit more difficult, but for the most part, you can farm up just about everything that you need, to the point where you can get away with selling just about everything that you have in your inventory, if only then to be able to buy the things that you want. In fact, I would even argue that the player is rewarded a little bit for selling everything that they have to the vendors, because if you sell items to the faction vendor, it actually gives you positive reputation, which pushes you up in the ranks faster and allows you the ability to be able to buy better weapons and armor sooner. So by literally selling everything off that you have to those vendors, you can kind of buy your way into better gear. Now, of course, this could just be the way that this German developer decided that they wanted to make it work. If that works for them and it works for the player base, that's great. Unfortunately, in this case, I don't think that there's enough of a differentiator here for the cycle to ever be able to disconnect itself from being compared to a game like Escape from Tarkov. The similarities here, in my opinion, are just too many. Because that it is a much simpler version of Escape from Tarkov, it may appeal to an audience that isn't really looking for getting into so many in-depth mechanics like what Escape from Tarkov has. There's an awful lot of math, an awful lot of theory crafting, and an awful lot of stuff kind of hidden behind the scenes that a lot of people like myself go in to test and try and see what's going on with it that you don't really have to do in a game like The Cycle, because it's kind of simple and straightforward. And for that reason, if you're looking for a quick game to fire up, get into a run, and just kind of go and see what it is that you can produce, maybe get 3, 4, 5 rounds in the same amount of time that you could get in 1 or 2 raids in Escape from Tarkov, then you can get away with doing that in a game like this. If you were to compare The Cycle and Escape from Tarkov on a sheet and try to describe both of them, the crux, the summaries of those 2 games would read very, very closely. The main difference is that Escape from Tarkov came first. In a lot of ways, The Cycle feels as though it is Tarkov Lite. Because of that, a game like The Cycle and its mechanics will very much be tied to and compared to a game like Escape from Tarkov a lot. It's just too similar. However, there are enough differences here to where I think that The Cycle can find its place. For better or worse, though, I think that that place is going to end up being somewhere that people go to be able to load into a raid in order to be able to get a quick run in because they may not have as much time, or they're looking for a game that doesn't have as complex of a level of systems that a game like Escape from Tarkov has. It almost feels as though it's a sci-fi-esque futuristic gateway drug to graduating to something like Tarkov that has just more of whatever it is that The Cycle is offering. That's not to say that I think that The Cycle is incapable of standing on its own. It can, and I believe that it will at some level. Personally, I don't like the idea of pay for convenience on an ongoing basis. If it were me, it would be a package deal like it is in Escape from Tarkov, and then you leave people to their own devices and worry about the game sales. If you want to sell skins for the cool guns, then by all means sell skins. But pay for convenience for me sounds an awful lot like pay to win when you have the ability to just accelerate crafting whenever you want, as long as you have farmed materials that take next to no time to be able to generate. Anyway, guys, that's what I have for this one. Thank you so much for coming and checking this out. Hopefully this sheds some light on the mechanics of both of these games and how they compare to one another, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.